And that's where we get our English word methods. And method simply means there's a plan, there's a plot, there's a process, there's a technique. In other words, the attacks or the assail of the enemy toward us is well crafted, well calculated, well plotted, well planned, it's deliberate and well designed. In other words, when the enemy attacks you, when the enemy tempts you, he's not going to randomly just attack you. He knows exactly what he's doing because his temptation or attack towards you is not random, it's not incidental, it's not coincidental, it's not accidental, but rather intentional. Are you following me here, church? So in other words, when he begins to battle out with you, when he begins to send his struggles toward you, he's going to attack you at the point of your weakness. Listen, our enemy is not dumb. Our enemy is smart. Therefore, he studies us. He knows us. He knows exactly where we're going to fall. He knows how to trip us. In other words, again, if he's going to tempt you, he's not going to tempt you on your strong point. For instance, if you are strong against vices, he's not going to tempt you and say, you know what, you're good at smoking, here's a cigarette, haha, you're tempted now, haha, smoke now. Of course not. Why? You're not a smoker. Or for instance, you are not an alcoholic person. Well, no matter how much beer or wine he presents towards you, well, you're not going to fall into that temptation of being an alcoholic, right? Why? Because you're not an alcoholic. However, what he's going to do is because it's methodeia. It's a scheme. He's going to attack you at the point of your weakness. Perhaps your weakness is lust. I guarantee you, every turn you make, there would be some kind of a pornographic material, a sexy individual, perhaps a naked man or a woman, if that's your weakness. You following me here? Or for instance, maybe your weakness is about money, love of money. And so therefore, you're going to be tempted, you know what? I'm not going to church today. Why? Because I have to go to work. I cannot go Saturday night church. I'm tired. Plus, I have to get up Sunday morning to go back to work. I'm going to skip Sunday. There's a temptation. He knows exactly how to tempt us because it is all well planned out. Now look at verse 12. However, though, for our struggle is not against flesh and blood. Now, pay attention to that word struggle. That word struggle is the idea of this old ancient Greek or Grecian hand-to-hand combat. In other words, Paul was saying here that you have this hand-to-hand combat wherein two people are fighting against each other, using all of their energy and exert all forces and effort to put that person down on the ground and for that person never to get up again. So what Paul is saying here is our struggle is this. We have a wrestling match. Every single day we struggle with, not against flesh and blood. We don't wrestle with the flesh and blood. In other words, our enemy, folks, is not the outward, visible circumstance or people. It's not. Look at verse 12. Our enemy is against the rulers, the authorities, the powers of this dark world, against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly realms. Folks, we must acknowledge it that our enemy is not flesh and blood. Our enemy is the dark forces of this world, and he goes by the name Satan, or the devil, or demons, and his minions. And unless we accept this fact, then we're going to continue blaming people. We're going to see that our enemy is Barack Obama. Why? Because the economy is not improving. Our enemy is going to be government policy. Why? Because I still don't have a job. Our enemy is going to be my spouse. You know why? My Christian life is like this? Because of my wife. She's not a good wife. Or maybe you're saying, you know why my Christian life is a struggle? Because of my husband. He is not a godly husband. You see how we end up blaming spouses and people, sometimes even our children, and sometimes even our very own self. But our struggle is not against people, not against church people, but against Satan. And that is why there is an invisible world, If we could show it, please. Thank you. There is an invisible war in an invisible world from which we are all involved in. That's what you call spiritual warfare. Folks, there is a war there. And just as the visible world is a reality, the invisible world is also a reality. It is not something that we could ignore. All the things that we do when we blame people or policies or circumstances or consequences, folks, those are all symptoms. Are you here with me? Those are just symptoms, but they are not the source. The source is our arch enemy, and many of the things that we see on the surface came from our arch enemy, who goes by the name Satan, devil, evil, Lucifer, demons, legions, deceiver, murderer, thief, slanderer, Beelzebub, tempter, prince of this world, accuser, serpent, and many, many more. Our arch enemy is Satan. Listen, church. Our arch enemy has one goal for each and every one of us: destroy our lives. Look at what Jesus said in John 10:10. The thief, who's the thief? Satan. Comes only to steal. Did you see that? Kill and destroy. But Jesus said, I have come that they may have life and have it to the full. Jesus gives us abundant life. He wants us to have a life of joy. He wants us to have a life of peace, a life of hope, a life of success, a life of prosperity. However, Satan would do everything he could to give you a miserable life, because that's the kind of life he's having right now, a miserable life. Why? Because he knows exactly where he's going to end. But he knows exactly where we're going to end. And therefore, unless we acknowledge this, that there is an invisible war, and my arch enemy is not my pastor, my arch enemy is not the song leader, my arch enemy is not the people at the church, my arch enemy is Satan, then folks, we're just going to blame people. We're just going to keep fighting with people. Florence Nightingale, a World War I nurse, once said, life is a hard fight, a struggle, a wrestling with the principle of evil, hand to hand, foot to foot. Every inch of the way is disputed. Now please don't misunderstand me here, okay? I am not denying personal responsibilities. I am not saying that we are not responsible to many of our actions. We make our own choices. We make our own decisions. And a lot of times when we make bad choices and bad decisions in life, we're going to suffer some bad consequences. For instance, if you are into a habitual, again, smoking or drinking or excessive eating or other vices that you are in, of course, the consequence of that will be sickness. However, yes, the action brought about, or the consequence brought about by our action, is something that we brought upon ourselves. However, though, that's when the enemy would come in, because once we are already there, suffering the consequence of our bad choices, he would exploit it. He would manipulate it to the point that he's going to provoke you for what? To be angry with God. Lord, I'm sick. Why are you allowing me to be sick? Why are you allowing me not to have a job? Why you are allowing me to have a marriage conflict? That's what he would do. Yes, it might have originated from you. However, the enemy is going to exploit that to provoke you to be angry with God, doubt God, don't believe in God, turn your back on God. And let me ask you this. Do you have right now an unresolved issue or issues in your life? Just think about this. Do you have right now an ongoing, prolonged, long-standing, chronic issues or struggles with your life right now? Perhaps you've been dealing with this for months, You've been dealing with this for years. You've been dealing with this for a long, long time. And you just cannot